screen recording and screen sharing. Number 2. Okay, so the last time we have been we started implementing a larger project using Qt. In our particular case, this was a chat client. You can quickly run it and then run it again so that we have so that we can test what we did and that it is still working, and we remind ourselves how it was working. So we can start it and we can detach all and then run it again. That's a simple way to get multiple instances. Our system is implemented such that it starts with port 1, 2, 3, 4, but for every subsequent instance it will just try out ports until it finds one that works. So we can create a new chat, and now, as you see, it already works nicely. We are currently only using TCP. Also, we can notice that there are some smaller features missing. That there are some minor features missing. For example, our incoming connection does not tell us from where it came. And I see we lost a letter. Oh, that's a bug that we will need to fix. Apparently, we are losing one letter each time. So let's quickly debug this. So we go to our chat session, remove message left buffer, pause -1. I think just the -1 seems to be the error. Let's see. Again, debug, detach all, and rerun. Zack. Yeah. Now it's working fine. And what we could now improve would, for example, be how to make the UI behave more the way we want it. Also, maybe how to make it more, how to make it remember the settings we chose. So like the size, and then maybe where the separator is. We could also remember which tab is open, although since we always start with an empty tab, then that is not necessary. So we could start with that. So we go to our main class. We will want to create a variable, a global variable of the type QSetting. We first need to include it. Zack. Settings. Settings. Then let's call it the conf. And we can now select a couple of things. So as you see, there are different options that can be specified when creating this setting object. One is format, which we would want to specify. So let's see what formats there are available. Zack. So we have format native, format ini, and format registry in case we are on a Windows system. We will choose format ini because it is the most user-friendly. The format native would basically on Linux choose a ini file, and on Windows choose one of the registry locations. Scope we do not want to specify. Organization is also not. Yeah, so let's see what is which options are mandatory. So we set the format. We need to specify scope. So let's see. We choose user scope since we want the application to be set. So we want the ini values to be set per user, so that every user has their own. Then we need to specify an organization name. So let's say okay, the application already is optional, but let's set messenger. There should be a okay, one moment please. Should be also an option to specify in which file we want to store this data, and that's not sure whether we can specify that after we created the object or whether we need to specify it while we are creating the object, which is possible. That is a bit more limited in scope. I think it will be limited. Let's see which options we have here. Fine, and we have this constructor, so maybe we should just try this one. That looks more user-friendly actually. The other one would by default select some location for us, but we want to do it manually, so we check again what we have. So file name, we will prepare later, format will be ini file, and that's all we need. Okay, file name is equals application application directory path. That should be the right one, I think. We will see. Process equals. Let's quickly check whether that gives us the directory we want. I think application directory path should be a good location for our config ini. Yep, so it stores it in the folder where our binary resides. So if we go here and there, once the file is created, we will create it in this directory. So this is nice, F9. And before we finish, we will sync that. So sync saves everything to the file. Reading should be automatic once the file is opened here, and then we will want to save a few things before we sync. So set value, it takes only one key, which can be a section name, so let's call it UI slash main window, comma, and it takes a Q variant. So a Q variant is a object which can represent many different types. So it cannot represent any arbitrary type, but it represents all machine types. It represents strings. It can represent byte arrays, lists and maps of variants, as well as a very large amount of Qt specific types like QColor, etc., etc., QDatetime, and so on and so on. So it's quite useful if you want to just pass something unspecified. Of course, it has a significant computational overhead in comparison to using just a machine type or using just string. There are also limitations with regard to how you can use variants after you have assigned them. So usually when you want to, for example, for a string, you can just easily append things to a string. With a variant, you have to convert the variant to a string, append it, and then convert it back to a variant. So it's obviously much more complex of an operation. But let's continue here. So we would want to assign something of the type byte array, and this. So the current window should have store state. Was it save? Save state. I think save state saves everything, not just geometry. Yeah, version 0 should be fine. And here we will do the opposite. We will value. Now we need to tell it to what to convert it, because our oops, restore state takes a byte array. So with the variants convert, they have constructors such that you can convert pretty much anything to them just by assigning simply. But for the other way around, if you want, they don't have a cast operator, so you need to explicitly say what you want them to be converted to. So now, of course, it will not really do anything since we don't have saved anything to the ini. But the hope is that once we now position and resize the window to the size and position we want, after we close it, it should, once we reopen it, reopen the same place and with the same size. Once it's loaded. Nope. Should we have taken the restore geometry? Maybe it was geometry. I don't remember. Then we need to resave it again. Oh, we should actually check whether the file was created. Well, the file was created and it saved some data to it, so that should not be the problem. Yeah, it was save geometry, not save state. Well, so that's one thing, and the other thing which we would want to save and then restore will be the position of the splitter. Set value my new split, comma, what was it? Mpass main splitter. I think with the splitter it was state. We will just try save state if that works for the splitter. If not, then we will fall back to trying geometry again. Restore state. The first start should again not yield any difference as the value does not exist, so the restore function internally will not do anything. But then after we have put the splitter where we like it, and then when we close it, we can check whether it saved something, but I'm pretty sure it did. The question is just if it saved the right thing. So here we have some data saved. Of course, this format is kind of not very user friendly, so we could improve on that later on. Yeah, it stored the position, so this is already progress. What we could do, if we would want to, would be to create a custom class derived from our from QSettings, which would allow us to save data in more user-friendly formats whenever we want. Or we could do this here manually as well. So we could just here to base64, and then this is string. So the question, of course, then is whether we want to go with the effort of a custom class, or whether we want to save then work whenever we do something, or whether we want to have to be able to use it faster, but then we'll have to have their own class. So q from base from base64. This gives us a much nicer encoding, and as said, this mechanism could be implemented in a derived. It doesn't like string. It wants a byte array, so let's make it 2-byte array. On the reading, it doesn't matter to what we cast the variance so much, since it's already read. But when saving, it's important to have the right type to make it being saved in the right encoding. So now you see it is much more compact. So I think we should try to keep this approach when working with byte arrays and saving them. So I'm not sure why Qt decided to by default not use such an approach, but instead encode it in such a more exotic form. But well, they did, and now we have to deal with it. So we have already improved the UI here slightly, and let's think what would be the next thing that we would want to add. So I think one that part of the implementation that is still missing would be some option to send and receive files. We could also look into creating more menu options. We could also add a toolbar. That would be probably a good next step. A toolbar allows us to well, more easily access some commands, and likewise, like with the menu bar, no, it's not likewise. Where do we have our main style? Grid layout. Okay, so it's a grid layout. So we will add an own menu bar. So it's not q enter menu bar. I'm thinking whether we should change the main layout to use, instead of a grid layout, whether we should use just a vertical layout. I think that will be more user friendly at this level. So let's quickly change that. Q layout stem. The reason is with the grid layout, you need to keep track of at which offsets you are inserting things, while when you use the VBox layout, you can easily just add widget, and you don't need to think about at which position you are inserting them, because it's automatically incrementing the next to the next available spot. So menu bar, add widget, and here now we can remove this specific position specification. So let's add at least one menu. One menu bar command, and add action, and we can actually add an action which we have already created, like this one. So obviously the next step here will be to maybe give an icon to it, since just the text in the menu bar does not look very nice. That should not be that big. Something's not great with our toolbar, so let's say we add the widget. Yeah, okay, so we should we will have to set the resizing of this thing. Set size policy to Q size. Q queue size policy, I think that should be maximum. Yeah, and we also should change the border layout. Main layout here. Set content margins 0, 0, 0, 0. It will make it look. Wait, does it look actually different? Ah, sorry, not main widget. We want main layout. We want to get rid of the border, which is about 6 pixels wide on each side. That doesn't look good. Suck. Well, that also doesn't look good. Let's add maybe a 1 pixel or 2 pixel border on every side. Yeah, that looks nice. This works also nice, but we want to add an icon. So first of all, we need to actually have an icon. So let's go here, Messenger, create new folder, resources. We already have here the QRC file. That is fine. Let's find an icon. Oops. New message. The icons from this site can be used for free in open source projects, so probably for most scientific applications it's good enough. That looks nice. This one, let's go with this one. Yeah, that looks nice. So let's move it to our resource folder and give it a better name, like new message PNG. We don't need to actually add it here to the resource filter. We only need to edit the QRC file. If we wouldn't have a QRC file, then we would need to add one. But since we already have it, then we don't have the prefix, just an empty thing, and add files. So Qt will read this QRC file and then add all the necessary files. It also specifies to us the URL, how the file can be accessed. And it's actually quite a nice mechanism. So you can in Qt specify own namespace prefixes, and create something that allows you to open various resources as a file just by providing a name. So if we here check what other overloaded functions we have, we notice that we have one that takes not just a name but first an icon. Then we'll just apply this icon, and when we run this, now we will see that the icon will be displayed in the menu, in the menu bar, and in the toolbar. It's called the toolbar. Why did I call it the menu bar? I will need to... Yeah. So we have here our icon. And I think we can improve on that also. We should use a toolbar class that's more suitable for our use case than the menu bar. The nice thing about the toolbar is that you don't only have the ability to add actions, you have also the ability to add arbitrary widgets. So you could have like an search box in your toolbar, or some graph that shows something. That is quite an improvement. Okay, and as said, it behaves the same way. It allows us here to click it and then do something. So yeah. What you can also add are so-called separators, which are these vertical lines. Oops. So it can be structured quite nicely. One thing that is not as trivial is if you want to add like something to the other end, then you need to add here a spacer item that will change the spacing. Also, I think we might be able to work without this after switching to the toolbar class, because this should by default have this max behavior. Yeah. Okay. So that's that, and I think the next step would be to decide how we want our messenger to work on a larger scale. So currently it is quite limited. We only can send messages to people that we know the IP address of, and we also don't have really an ability to find out who that is. So one thing we might want to add would be an option to configure a username. So we will need a new window, but this time we maybe will be lazy and will create one using the Qt designer. So we will add here a new item. Sorry, that's this shortcut way. Add show all templates. Qt main window form file. Let's call it config UI. Well, it's already called. Let's call it config window. Zack. Let's make it slightly smaller. It's a bit too big. And then we'll add a class called config window as well. The config window base class q main window public. Yeah, that's fine. So as usual, the files were created in the default filter, so we move them to our UI portion, and then we can take a look here how this usually is done. So we need to include the generated file, which will have of course a different name. It will be q how do you call it, config UI config Fuente, and then oops, that was the wrong file. And then here the class name will be also analogously selected. Should be. Let's see if that works. Compile. Did this work as expected? It might not. Config compile. Okay, it didn't say. Maybe the class name isn't set by default. Object name. Yeah, it's not. Need to set this first. compile. Yeah, now it has the right name. Or not. One moment, please. Yes. I forgot to add class to the name. Now it should be fine. Compile once more, and now it's no longer complaining. Nice. So we go here. Right. We are missing a constructor, so let's quickly add this queue and right, UI.setup UI and this. Okay, then we should probably go to our UI and add actually something that we want there to be. So let's say want the thing to have a grid layout. We set this again to be a grid layout. It kind of gives us a grid layout in a grid layout, but this is fine. And then, well, actually we could also go for a form layout, but the grid is more flexible. Let's keep it with the grid. So label space line edit for the name, maybe another spacer for the thing to not be too big. Should be good enough. Text nickname, and this thing just gets a text name. Right, and then we can add more things, and we can maybe add something here if you want. Oh, and we of course need a button bar for the whole thing that we can save. Don't need a toolbar. Status bar. Don't need a status bar, but we can hide it later on if it's annoying us too much. Also, alternatively, you could have created this not as a main window but as a normal window. Then it would not have these additional elements. But for now, let's just keep it as is. And now, we of course, need in our UI an option to open the settings. And we'll also need an icon for that. But that's something for later. So file here. New chat, then we get another separator. We won't set an icon for now, we will add an icon later. Config. And we need a slot for that. So add a slot on settings. No, on config. On show config, that sounds good. config when no, let's go with exec. We cannot execute, it's the wrong. Okay, then let's stick with show and let's make it a pointer. Config when show, right. Okay, so show runs over it automatically, and we can specify can't we? Okay, then we need to do it manually. What we want is to, what is complaining? Config w and d. Oh, right, it should be public. Right. So what we also will want is to delete the object once it closes. So here inside we can see what signals this has. This thing. There should be somewhere a close event. Maybe it's on the widget. Okay, the close event is on widget, and close is a slot also on widget. But this is not overwritable, so we'll go with close event. Wait, I want to see one more thing. If we can go widget, right? So we have close slot and close event. We don't have any signals. Okay, then we'll have to do it this way. Right, so this delete later, and if we add a destruct, then we should see that it will be triggered once we close the window. Oh, we forgot to send the close event further. That might actually cause a crash, but let's see whether it is fault tolerant enough or not. Config. We forgot the breakpoint. It actually worked without any issues, but we should have had relate the close event to the parent class for everything to work out correctly. Yep. Okay, and now we will want to make the buttons that we have there work. So you can see how this is called. So the default name should be just button box, which is fine. So UI button box, we can go to the definition of that thing and see what What signals it has? It has this accept and reject signal. Accept is usually okay or yes or a button of this meaning, and reject is, well, the opposite. Plus you can have an event clicked if you have other buttons defined on your button box, button bar. So what we want to do is connect this. Wait, first the sender. So connect button box, comma signal rejected with this, comma slot close. That will make the cancel button work. At least it should. Let's see. Menu config cancel. Yep. And then we will connect the. Alright, and the. We don't want the status bar. Hide. Before we continue, let's quickly improve on the design of our config window. We also don't need this breakpoint. We know it that this now works fine. Yeah, that looks perfect. Right. So the next thing we want to connect is the. How was it called? Accept or accepted? Oops, that's too much. There is unfortunately no IntelliSense for the slot names, so that's a bit annoying. And since we want to save something, we need our own slot. On OK. So on OK, we'll save config and then invoke close. Except on OK, we can put a breakpoint here. And we should probably add something that will auto-generate a nickname on the first start, so that we don't well, start without one. Queue message. You can pin this as well. So here, when we have our settings, so if the conf value how do we call it, chat name, comma to string is empty. So if this is empty, then we'll set it to something. Set value user %1 comma arg. Oops, what did that current so 1 2, that should be is it current? Maybe there is no. The current was defined in Qt5, but it might not be in Qt6. Let's just use a normal rent function. Right, and then we of course want to load this and then have the ability to change it. So here we will load all the settings. UI.text name set text. Okay, doesn't know what the conf is, so we need to make it known. Then the conf, so that tells it that there is such a thing. And then of course when we press OK, we'll have the opposite. So set value text, right? Okay. Could also display it in the window title, so the nickname, but I guess it's not necessary. Config, and let's call it user test user. And if we now reopen config, then it keeps our settings. So we have already a nickname. So what we would now want is an ability to communicate this nickname to the other side. And instead of displaying the username and port, the IP and port, display the username and IP in maybe in brackets, optionally. So we will need to improve our implementation of chat session. Also, one more thing we should improve. That wasn't a very thought through option. We should not like put the thing everywhere, but instead we should put it into our precompiled header. Then we will be able to access the conf in any file in our entire project. That improves code maintainability in this case. So we want a chat session. Right. So the way we want this to work is that when a connection gets established, we will get so on connect will be triggered, and when we have an incoming connection, where was that? When we have an incoming connection, then we use the set socket from somewhere, from here, but then technically onConnect will not be triggered because it already was triggered. So what we would want there would be to manually trigger a onConnect if we are entering with a created socket. So you can here put a queue message box, information, just for testing, we'll remove it later. Okay, so we expect now when we run it and then run the other instance, for every window to throw one connected message box. And from those message boxes, and from these functions, this onConnect will then add something that will send our username to the other side in a way which will not cause it to display to be displayed as a message in the log. Detach all, so that we can rerun. Of course, it's a bit boring if both have the same username, but we could easily change that if we start them from different directories. So now we connect from this to the other one. This one told us connected, and this one told us connected as well. So this worked out nice. Now we of course only can close one by terminating this. So our chat session, do we have a send text? We have a receive text, we have a send text. So cool send, how do we call it? You could call it send control or send command or send data. I wouldn't like send data because data would be maybe something for a file or image. So send data should be rather reserved for payload you want to send to the other user. So send control signal or send signal. Send control. Then we will somehow want to characterize this control thingy. Let's with a prefix or some ID. So let's call it ID. And then we will want to send some data. And now the question is whether I want to send the control data only as strings, or if we want to send them as well, something as binary data, for example. Or yeah, that probably would be useful enough. So let's go with binary. Although on the other side we can convert everything to strings, and when you think about how email works, email is a inherently text-based protocol. So everything that's not a text in an email gets base 64 encoded and then still sent as text. So let's go with sending text still. So ID and data, and we will call it param. So we have an ID and a parameter for a control message. And then of course we will here need to think about how to make the system know that this is a control message and not a real message. And usually would use some sort of escape character, so we could go with really just the \\, plus id t.to Latin 1 plus space. So our id is not allowed to contain spaces, and the param will be just space separated, and that sounds good enough. So on connects, and we'll call it a \name. So the backslash is always added, so we don't need to write it, and then we will add here as a string our nickname. So the conf value chat nick. Okay. We need to convert it to a string. I think we will later on go with creating an own config class that has like not value but rather get str or something that does the conversion automatically. It is, I think, more convenient than having to cast each time. Just checking for typos. Oh, it was nick. Oh, how do I call that? I called it chat name. It's good to check for typos because it's easy to do. And so we have the name, we send it, and then what we will want here in our onReceive function, instead of have this receive text, we will want to have something internal to process void on control or receive control received on control message. Let's call it like this. It will take the same two arguments, and it will be dispatched to from our onRead function. Technically, you could of course have all the code that's in onControl message inside your onRead. Oh, and one more thing we should do, we should make this virtual, because you might want to overwrite it and extend it with some additional functionality. Right. Could make more things virtual, but for now we'll just stick to that. I'm not sure whether we will use the ability, but it's always good to have an ability and not use it than not to have an ability. No, then to have, then to need an ability and not to have it. Right. So here now we have to check whether the message starts. So if message.left 1 is equals \, then we know that this is a control message, else it's a text message. Right. So now we want to split to, I think we already implemented somewhere, didn't we? Sure we did. We have it here. We just need to include it. Common age. So control message to message.mid1. We don't want to get the \, and we split by the separator, and it's a forward slash. Oops. So now we can on control message first comma second, and now if we have the breakpoint and we run it again, we run it twice so that we have to connect to what, although we could connect to ourselves. That will be even a faster test. Let's do it this way. Menu, new chat, and we get here id name and name test use, and this will be repeated then a second time, and voila, we have now both ends of the chat in one window. So what we will now do is we'll check if this is name. So if equals name, then chat session. We will add a variable called name to which we will assign it qstring name Strichpunkt name is gleich param. And of course, when we will have more parameters, more things, then we will add here more cases for our if. And we will also want to emit an event. So let's quickly add here a signal. Let's add a signal void information changed. So we will just emit this generally whenever some information changes that is relevant for the UI. Information changed. And we also need a function to retrieve the name. Also, we might want a setName function maybe. Or here for start an ability to specify a name. That's nicer. Const qstring reference name is equals empty, so name is optional. The idea is that when we are starting a conversation, we usually know with whom we are starting it. At least later, once we have a working contact list. And then it would be, of course, nice and name to already have the name displayed even if the connection isn't yet established. Qstring get name const return name capital N. Right, good. So we have our name, we have the thing. So now we go to our queue message, and when we add a new chat started, here we have our add tab, and we do it by chat. Okay, so we'll need also an slot for the config change. Void on info changed. Right. Right, that was not chat, that was a chat session. Chat session stem per chat is equals chat session stem there. And we need to connect it, so get the thing in here on chat started. Connect per chat punct data comma with this comma slot. We'll fill in the signal later. Just to avoid typos, we'll just copy it from here. Info changed. Right, and we should probably trigger an info changed just in case as soon as we are done with that. But we then don't have a sender, so no, we don't trigger it. We just wait for it to be triggered properly. And now we can retrieve from our chat map. Did we do that anywhere? No, we did not. So chat tab is equals chat map value from pchat. If not true, then turn. That's just a failsafe, should not happen. What did we map to? What we mapped chat pointer to chat tab. That is suboptimal. Do we keep that somewhere else? chat manager, we keep that here, chat sessions. So let's go with just the asterisk. Right, that worked. Here pin chat, because that's data. So what we want is the ability to get from the raw sender value to into a tab. Now we have the chat tab, but if we have the tab, then we're still missing its index. Because if we want to change something in the chats, find the ID. No, that doesn't help us. Tab position. No. I don't think this will. I think we need either to have the index. To save the index, we need to save the index properly, otherwise we would need to look through the whole list each time. That would not be great. So let's make a queue pair. But this can of course change when we delete an item. Then we will have to look it up manually. Okay, so for e or for tab tabs chats is the tab controller, yeah, tab widget. So we should have be able to get a tab, add tab, insert tab, remove tab. I just count without anything. So count I plus plus. Oops. So widget at I is equals this. So if and here, and then we can break because it will only be true once. So chat set tab text, set tab text, yes. Set tab text I comma right. So we want chat session. Let's do it like this. %1, %2, comma argument, chat session name and underscore. Sorry, get name, and then we can get URL from here. Right. So this will be semi-great because it still does not show. Let's handle the case where we don't know where the connection comes from. So q string SOL is equals this, and if this is not empty, then we do this, and else we just set on just the name without anything else. Right, that is a small improvement, so let's run that. And we have test user, and one tells us where we are from, the other one does not. This is something we will improve on next. So let's see here. We will be missing one information. So when we have here our this one on socket and on connect, set socket, and we want to set the URL murl.set host socket local is peer address. No, wait. No, it should be peer address. String. Right, so we get the address, the remote address from the connection. We could also get the remote port, but based on how this works on Windows, how generally sockets work is that the outgoing port for a connection will not have any relation to the port we ourselves are listening at. First, we can of course run this, but what we also then could do is, just for demonstration purpose, we could set here the port, that we can get from here, and we will see that it is not peer port, not the one that we would expect, but some random number from the high port range. So we cannot use the port that we see on an incoming TCP connection to connect back. So as you see here, in this case it selected the port 5000 something. Of course we cannot close it, so if we open another pair of communication channels, we will see it will again select here a different port. The format here of the IP address, it looks differently than here, is because this is an IPv6 format, so you can map IPv4 addresses onto IPv6, but you cannot map it the other way around. It will set the scheme to TCP. Oops. Right. We should be able to we should have the ability to tell it how we want to convert the address. Do we have a conversion? The 2v4 address, we can do that, but this is okay. Q host address. They have a typo. Yes, I have a typo. Q host address. That should work. Of course, now it limits us to IPv4 addresses, but that is okay for now. So you see now we have the same address, just a different port. So what we would want to add here would be another message that we send out when the connection is established, which tells the other end where to send data back, and that brings me to the next point. We need an ability to know that. So when we go here and we create here our our port, and we should have a global variable listen port 0 for starters, and once we are successful, then we will set it. Oh wait, that's the wrong one. That's the success case. To port. And similarly, like with the conf, we can use extern to exit, but this time, since I think we'll only need it once, we'll just define it here. And we'll then send this port as well to the other end. So name, port, and here Q string number, and then we copy the name from the top. Right. And then of course here, likewise, else port, and URL set port Right. Palms to short. And we need to emit this again. This is of course not ideal because we'll be emitting this for every message. Each time we could queue those signals later to have a bit better efficiency, but for now it's fine to do it this way. And now we oh, it didn't work. Interesting. Let's see if this was triggered. So if only the info changed failed, or if we have some other issue. It didn't send port. We broke something. We forgot the the new line. I think here somewhere. No, we did not. \n. Let's put a breakpoint here and see what happens. There is some bug that made the receiving of the port message to be delayed. Not sure why. Right, so first we read username. Oh, I know why. The data were cached and then they were sent in one package, and here this thing is just one call. We actually need a loop. That's the wrong place to start the loop. We want the loop to start here. And then instead of return we can just break. Right, good. Now it should work. Yep, and we have now the right port, so in principle we could add the user to our user list, and then we could later on communicate with him, at least until he changes his IP address. So at this point we should probably consider how we want the messenger to work with regard to finding people on the internet. Of course, the typical way how most common messengers work is just server based, so whether it's IRC, XMPP, or something more proprietary like Signal or WhatsApp, they all use a server or multiple servers, and there you can just connect to a server and the server will give you an entire list of people that it knows, or rather you would request names and then it will tell you how to connect to those people. Often the communication itself would be mediated by the server, so you would not connect directly to some other user of WhatsApp, but you would send whatever you want to tell that person to the server, and then the server will send it to that person. Our approach, of course, is a more decentralized one, since we want direct connections. So the server here would not act as a relay for communication. If anything, it would only act as a sort of phone book where you can look up the latest IP address for some username. An important thing to take into account is, of course, how you handle situations where multiple users would want to have the same username. Normally, with a server-based approach, you would just require a password during sign-in, such that you can verify, and the first user to register a username would be able to use it, and other ones would need to find another username. If we would want to create a decentralized system, then there would not be an option to register username like this, at least not easily. So the system would rather allow multiple people with the same username to have the same username, and then the people would be distinguished by some other characteristics, for example by a fingerprint of a public key which they have to generate first. So kind of they would be identified by that fingerprint and would just have a name. So you could have multiple people with the same name in your contact list, and you could still tell them apart based on that private key. But currently we don't have here any encryption yet built in, so we could alternatively just use a randomly generated number and assume there are no clients that purposefully try to impersonate someone else. And I think for a very simple proof of concept tool that would be even good enough. But then this brings us to the next point, namely how to find people in a decentralized system where we would not have servers. And there are a couple technologies that can help with that. The most efficient one would be a distributed hash table, but it also requires the network to have a certain minimum size in order to operate. So it's kind of missing the point to create a distributed hash table with only a handful users. You usually would want to target audiences of at least a couple dozen to or 100 users, and the more they are, the better it works usually. So such a complicated approach probably for us would be a overkill. There are very simple methods to create such distributed networks, which don't work well with many users, but which are okay for a few users. That would be just networks where every node in the network tries to keep the complete, let's say, phone book of all other users, and then you just need to connect to one user and you can ask them for all other users that are on the network. Obviously the system does not scale, because at some point when you have thousands of users, the nodes will be busy all the time just synchronizing the data, which people are right now online and which are not. So this is not something that would be recommended for any sort of file sharing or any sort of larger project, but for a very simple messenger to be used by only a handful of people, that would be a good approach. So we could go with that. To do this, we would just need to implement a local list of users, so that we will have like our own phone book, and then whenever a user connects to us, then we would add him to our phone book and then notify any other user in our list of that user that user was added by us. And one thing to keep here in mind is that, of course, if we send such a notification, we can create easily like a circle of notifications, so that we would get notified all the time. So let's say a user connects to us, we send a notification, so we are user A, and the user that connected is user X. We send a notification to user B, and user B sends a notification to user C, which knows us, so user C will send a notification back to us, and since we are relaying these notifications, we would then send it again to B, and then it would find its way to C, and so on and so on. So there needs to be some strategy how to ensure that an information that is being propagated through the network will not start running in circles. And a very simple approach to achieve that would be, for example, to only propagate that information further if we did not have this information before. There are, of course, more sophisticated methods for that, but I think for our application this would already be good enough. We only would need to handle the case if a new user connects, that we would want that user to get all the missing notifications that he missed, so to say. So ideally when the user connects to us for the first time, he would not tell us his username and port for us to distribute, and at the same time he would ask us for a list of all the other users that that we know, and then he would get the data, and then once that information gets distributed, everyone would be up to date. So I think we should start implementing that. As said, it's not a network architecture that would be reasonable to use on any production scale messenger or so implementation, but for just as a very simple mechanism, as a proof of concept, I think this is good enough. And it will work. Also, I might add that in the very early ages of file sharing, such schemes have in fact been used to distribute informations in networks before they had this better technologies like distributed hash tables and so on and so forth. So let's start with this new feature. So we will let's say what we will need. We have a chat manager, we have a chat session, so we'll need a contact manager class. See contact manager. I don't think we will need a dedicated contact contact class. I think a contact will be simple enough that we'll just have a struct defined inside the contact manager that will have all the data that the contact has, and that will be it. Although maybe for the purpose of making things more illustrative, we'll add a dedicated contact class as well. Usually when I write production code, I try to avoid creating classes which only have like one function and one member or something like that, because that usually just at some point it adds more confusion than it helps resolve. But if we want to maybe at some later point create something more sophisticated out of this example, we should design it in a way that it will be as extensible as possible. So let's do that the proper way. Okay, so we need to add, of course, since this is derived from QObject, the QObject macro, and let's create a constructor. Right, the same thing for our contact manager, and then we will of course need to create the actual constructor body. QObject parent, and for contact the same thing, stack without manager. Right. Then we need to give it a place to live. We can create it on here on our main UI object. Contact manager. C contact manager, MP contact manager. Chat manager, contact manager is new. We will need probably some signals and slots and stuff, but that's for later. Also, we'll need to think about how best to test this, because if we kind of just run one client, that will be kind of boring. So I think what we will do is we will change here this application directory to instead load the config file from the current working directory. I need to remember how to get that in Qt. One moment, please. Probably is on the Q application. Nope. It's either on Qdir or it's on. It was on Qdir. Qdir current path. Right. So what we can now do is we can create a few batch files which will start a couple instances of our messenger from different working directories, and and each of them will then have an own config ini. And I think that will be good enough. Or what we also could do is we could that's maybe even a better idea. We could get a command line argument and then just add a suffix to the config file. Arguments. This was it. It's a list of. It's a string list. String list. In index of instance and config. Let's change the whole thing slightly. String config file is just config in, and then here we'll change this config file prepend plus slash, this we don't need, and here if this is not -1, then we will add to our config file prepend arguments add post +1 plus right. Okay, loop. Okay, you will see in a second how this works. Right, so let's build that. So the first one will just still use the normal config file. So we should be still have our right size of everything. Yeah, and now there was just one issue that was that we cannot start this. This will probably crash. Yeah. We need to add our Qt binary path to our Windows path. Or we could set this individually, but let's quickly add that. Eigenschaften. Where did they put that? Weitere Systemeinstellungen. Umgebungsvariablen, Path. Okay. Right. Now it should start up just fine. And now if we QMessenger instance 1, then it created one config, and we can create instance 2. We need to resize. Oh, and we should give names to them. User 2, instance 1, user 1. It always has 31 as it's funny, it always has 31 as the random name, because we forgot to initialize the random number generator, so it always starts with the same seed. Let's quickly remedy that. and date time, current date time to ms since epoch. We will initialize it with some time usually. So if we build that, now we should, each time we start it, get another now more random number. So now we have, yeah, that was the number 4. I think 4 users for now will be enough. And each of them has their own config, so we can store things there. Storing like the contact list in the ini file is probably not ideal, but since we want this to be rather quickly implemented and not do everything the most complex way, we'll just start with using the ini file, and maybe later we will switch to a XML file. That will probably be a noteworthy improvement, but for now it's not necessary. So we have our contact manager. The contact manager here will of course have to have a list of contacts, so link. No, members always protected, and let's go with making usernames unique. So we just don't expect people on the network to reuse the same username. We will not add any other mechanisms currently, at least, to filter that. So we will make a q map of q string, which will be the username, and it will then here have a something we forgot to make, def q pointer from contact ptr hash include contact ptr and contacts. And of course we want to get them, so oops, right, and there is a typo here. So we can get our contacts, and then we will add a function to be triggered each time we see an incoming connection. So let's call it, actually that would be a slot. Void on contact. The name is a bit misleading because it doesn't mean a contact in terms of a contact object, but in terms of a connection. Right. And of course the next problem will be that we will not want to actually make a connection each time we notify. So we'll add a UDP port, which will be listening always on the same port as our TCP port. That works, luckily. If this wouldn't work, then we could always give it a fixed offset or something like that. But luckily you can have a TCP and a UDP port bind to the same port number, simply because they are differentiated by the protocol ID as such. So we will be using a different networking mechanism here for propagating those data. And here in the onContact slot we will just have the, what we will have, we have username and port and URL. Yeah, so const string reference name and const q URL reference URL. Contact manager. Right, one more thing to check, whether the listening port is created here. So we would want the contact manager to be instantiated later and receive the port as an argument, or rather we can also let's use a function for that open port. It should be the same port, or actually it might even be better because we cannot open a port on a failure, right? So let's put this open port, oops, once too much, in here. And of course need this open port function, so a intersection port, but this is not yet done, so it will return false because it's not implemented. Right, connection manager. Now we want to have a signal that we will connect to our slot. The signal will be emitted by what? Either the chat manager or a chat session directly. Connecting it to the chat session directly is not elegant, so we'll connect it to the chat manager. We'll create here a signal. I already have signals, so let's just add it here. Let's call it still on contact. And then what we'll also do is we will create. So first of all, we'll connect it. Message. Chat manager, comma. Let's go with the new method, reference, chat manager. What was it? On connection. The nice thing about this new syntax is that you don't need to, that you have intelligence that helps you with the contact manager. That you have intelligence which helps you with the whole things. We have included that. Okay. So we have the signal connected here with the slot, and now what we'll also do, we'll go to our chat manager and create the same signal on our chat session. And what we then can do is we can connect one signal to another signal. So chat manager, and I mean chat started or chat, right? So we only are interested in incoming connections, because outgoing connections we already know, so we don't care about those. So only here we will for this one we will connect chat.data, comma signal, chat session. Where were we? Right, meet this. So this is in the end more elegant. Right. And now we will need to ensure that once we have all the relevant data, so chat session, that only then we will emit our data. So here I would go with not setting the port, because the port is irrelevant, and each time we have on control message, actually either when we have this or that, typo. A couple improvements. True. True. If info change, then emit info change, and then also and then check if URL punkt port is not null and name is not empty. So if these two conditions are met, then emit on contact name, comma URL. Zack. Good. So now we should end up in our contact manager in onContact. Once when we connect to ourselves, and then we will go from there. Yep, we have a name where we cannot inspect the URL, so we could create here a helper variable toString as y is equal to string, so we can check what we get. New chat, start, and oh, we are missing the port. Why are we missing the port? This is not good. Here. Well, port. Well, this was set, but this was not null. What was it? Maybe it was -1 or something like that to indicate that it's not complete auto test is equals it probably returns like -1 or some special value if it wasn't set at all. So let's see. It has a port. Why does it have a port? Okay, it returns -1. The other one was for the other direction. So we just need, instead of check if it's 0, check if it's -1. If it's not -1, I mean. So now we should only end up once there and have the right port in the URL specified. Zack. Yep. So at this point we have all the data we need, and we could now broadcast this information to other clients on the network. So the next step will be here to add the UDP port, which will be needed for communication. So let's do that quickly. Contact manager hash include QUDP QUDP socket Q then pass socket open port. So if this is set, then return false because it was already open, so we do not want to reconnect to it. Then we want to create a new one as gleich and then we need to connect it. So bind q q q first the port and host address. No. We can just specify the port also good port. Right, and that this so if this is not true, then we delete that again and set it to 0, otherwise return true. And we only need to open the port. We do not need to we need to connect, of course, to the port our signals. Right, so we already had an example of that in our chat session on ready read. Yeah, that's that we need here, of course, to specify that it's UDP, and here chat manager, and we need to create this function as well. Okay. Already read. Right, so we have our already read, and here normally what we would do would be like read all, but since we want to know where the data came from, this actually we don't need to know that. Depends on what we are doing. We want to implement it in a way that we will always know it. So q buffer, q byte array, q byte array buffer, buffer resize to per socket, pending datagram size, that tells us the next packet that is waiting to be received. Then q host address sender and q uint16 sender port. Right. MP socket. Read datagram. Buffer.data, buffer.size, reference sender, sender, and reference sender port. Okay, so now we have all the data we need, and we can do something with them. We can, for example, put a breakpoint here for now. Right, and of course we will want to send this to everyone in our contact list, which at the beginning will be empty, which is not a problem. So contact, we have here our contacts. The contacts, we should populate our contacts somehow manually. Yeah, so when we call this on contact, then we should yeah, we will do that later. So in our on contact, we will want to broadcast this. So for each const contact ptr reference per contact punct m contacts, and we have nothing on it, so we need to first add some things on it. So protected well, actually we only need the URL, so q URL URL. Right. Q URL get URL const return URL. Actually, okay, so we can get a URL like this, and we want a set URL as well. Will we? Probably, maybe, we will see. Better to have it than not to have it. Q const URL reference URL. This is not a concept, is equals URL. Right. Okay. So contact m socket write datagram. It was write, not set. It was write datagram. Then we have some data and then the path. So q data. We should make a function that will do that for us. So contact no, q URL is equals get URL URL host. Does write datagram work with a? Nope, it needs an address. So q host address from host, comma and port. Oops. Alright, yo. So this we will put into a helper function. Broadcast data. Q. Wait, do we want that? Yeah. Wait. I have to think a bit about the proper order of operations to ensure that we will not send packages in endless cycles, as already mentioned earlier. So there is a little bit thinking before doing involved. We will create the data package later, and once we send it out, then we can create the contact. Right, and this should also only be done if there if we have a contact in the list. Yeah, so the way this should work is that if something changed, then we do a broadcast. If nothing changed, then we don't. So there are two scenarios. First of all, we check whether there is a contact for this name, because there might be. P contact is equals point value from name, and there are two scenarios. One, if there is no p contact, or rather p contacts is null. Oops, is null, or p contacts get URL is not our URL. So either the contact changed or the contact was added, and depending on what happens, there will be two different actions. Actually, maybe we will not use this broadcast function at all. And here will be, which one? We will rename this one p current contact, because we don't want to send data back to the same contact. That would be pointless. So if current contact is equals contact, assuming we had a contact, then continue. Want to skip this one. Right, and so we send only the update to everyone else, and then here we check if this does not exist. So if is null, then we equals yep, and we want to we also need to set the name of the contact that we will do later. Contacts, insert name comma p contact, and in any case now it exists, so we can set URL, and there realistically will not be a set name. The name will be just set here. So contact name, contact age, name will be a mandatory value for a contact, I guess. We may change that later, but for now let's stick with it being mandatory. Q string and name, and let's make here a get name Q string get name right. So we set the name, we update the URL, and that's it. So at this point it will send it to everyone, and then we of course need to create a data package that we want to have. We could either make it again text-based or create a binary format, but let's, for simplicity, just keep it text-based. We'll just add here a hash image, so that we have our split function, which we might need later, and actually we could build this probably directly. So is equals how do we name it? Just name it contact Doppelpunkt plus name plus, now we need a character which would not be allowed in the name, so we will need to define a character which we don't want to allow. Let's go with \n, because that's a new line that will definitely not be valid inside the name. Plus now url.toString. What is it complaining? Okay, then let's go with qstring, and then we convert this here data to UTF-8 because we want to be able to have Unicode characters in our name string. Simple enough format. Right. So this function is currently unused. Here we have a breakpoint, but we will not reach it currently. The thing is that well, wait, let's see. We should have a incoming connection when it connects the first time. So when we connect twice, it could be all we need. Let's try it out. As simple as that. We just need to wait for it to compile. So let's connect the first user and the second user. Oh, and something crashed, so it tried something. Socket wasn't initialized. Why? Oh, right. Because it really was not. Oops. Contact manager, socket. Okay, so again, let's start a couple of them. Two. Right, so now the idea would be that if I connect from this to this, then that one, no, they don't. What we need to add is something that when we create a connection, it will also trigger a on contact. We don't have that here. That is not great. So what I mean is that if we connect, for example, to ourselves. Oh, we did? Wait, oh yes, because we connected to ourselves. The problem is if we connect to something that is not ourselves, that we then don't add this thing. Or do we? No, we do. Because we get the name from the other end and then the contact gets added. So actually it should work. Do we connect this correctly? Chat manager. Incoming connection on contact. Right, this was missing. Yes. Yes, now it will be fine. Because now, even if we initialize the connection, it will trigger this on contact once the communication is there. And if we see that we know this contact already, then we do nothing. But if we see that we don't know it, then we will broadcast it to everyone. Okay. So I'm thinking how to in the easiest way to test this, because we want to receive this broadcast here. So we have first of all our first connection. We start option 1. Right. So we connect this to that, make a non-contact and nothing else. This one is here, and then we start another instance. And then we want to connect it to this one. And then this one will want to notify the first one, which is still under debugger. So, and voila, it worked. So, and here we get our data, contact user 2, and the URL. So now from here we could trigger on contact and then notify it to another user if it wasn't already known. So then we will kind of send it back to the one from whom we got this. So that is not ideal, but we could do that manually, let's say. So we take this loop here. So we will not but then we will not trigger on contact. We'll still need to add it and try to add it. Should add a helper function that will help us. Here. Boolean try add name and URL, and the idea is that they try or add or update. Try add or, and the idea is that it will give us true if it added or updated something, and it will give us false if there were no new data. Oops, it received. So right, so if this inner case is triggered, then it adds or updates and makes return true, as it makes return false. We should use this broadcast function, but we will add to it a URL called skip URL. So the idea will be that we'll broadcast to everyone except whomever has the URL that matches our skip URL. So if URL is equals skip URL, then continue. And technically skip URL should be an optional parameter, but let's say we'll do that later. Right, so name and URL as URL for testing. So broadcast data to UTF-8, comma, that's the skip URL, and I forgot here, and let's make this really optional. Right, and then we need to just try add or update name URL. So if try add or update, then data and broadcast, else do nothing. Right. So we take this, we go down here. Oh, and we need of course to extract the data. So right. Do we have a split function? We only have split 2. So let's add a helper function. Cool. Or you know what? Let's for now use the built-in split function. Q list. We want strings. Let's go with Q string list. Data is equals Q string from UTF-8 split \n data 0 split 2 data 0 comma double point auto sender name. So if sender name first equals contact, then we do this, and then now we need the URL. So Q string as URL is equals 1. Also we should check, so and no data data punct size is greater equals 2. Right, so we have the URL of the client, so Q URL is equals as URL, and name is the second argument here. Second URL, right. So we added that guy. We could basically just paste the original buffer, why not? But as skip URL we will specify a different URL. Q URL skip URL set what was it? Scheme TCP set host. I already had that somewhere. Chat message. No, chat session. Send port. Right, sender. Okay. So we have our skip URL. So we don't want to send a message back to where we got it from. We just want to send it to everyone else. Well, actually, there could be multiple skip URLs because no, there couldn't be. No, there could be. Because at this point we already have added that guy. That is a problem. I mean, we could in principle just ignore this sending back of data, or we make this into a list. Cool list. Skip URLs. Then we can have multiple skip URLs. Actually, that can be there is a nice shift operator for that. URL skip URL, and this will need to be changed into more places. Right, and capital L. So punct contains URL, then continue, capital U. Right, so we will not send it to the just created client, and we will not send it to whomever told us the information, but we'll send it to anyone else. Yeah. Good. That should kinda work. That should already work. So I think we will end here for today, since we are already a bit over time since we didn't have a break. And next, during the next lecture, we will add a list so that we see which connections we have and how they propagate. There will be no homework today. I will think of something easy enough for next week. Yeah, that's it. So have a nice evening, and if you have any questions, you can ask by email at any time. And we'll see each other next week. Bye bye.